Yes, YouTube, what is going on? We are back with another brilliant brand new edition of UK Prison Stories, brought to you by the host with the most. Yes, YouTube, what is going on? We are back with another brand new episode, brand new edition of UK Prison Stories, brought to you as ever by your host with the absolute most, Carlos Aldredos, Long Lartin, Category A. The worst of the worst gets sent there. The top, the cream of the crop, the big boy gangsters, the big boy shotters, the big boy robbers. Back in these times, I'm sure it was Category A's and Category B's. Nowadays, jails are full of Category A's, young kids committing crimes and getting banged up for crimes they ultimately are going to regret for the rest of their life. But I'm sure it's changed now. I'm sure the demographics have changed now. I've never been in a Category A prison. I'm sure that the breed of prisoner has changed, the class of prisoner has changed, his values has changed, his morals has changed. Probably not for the better. Should we just crack on?
Long Lartin prison near Evesham. It takes long-term prisoners, 72 Category A and 340 less dangerous Category B men. Many inmates think Long Lartin is a good prison. It isn't overcrowded or brutal. But even here the stress is on security, not rehabilitation.
These sort of guys, rehabilitation's pretty few and far between, isn't it? If you're a Category A, it's probably not your first rodeo. It's probably not your first time behind the door. You've probably made many mistakes, committed many crimes, and you've worked your way up the ladder to the Category A's. Very rarely do they just go, yeah, bang, you're a Category A prisoner. So yeah, they have to be security conscious over rehabilitation, really, don't they? Because these guys, most of them are doing life. What are you going to rehabilitate?
Inmates know that 60% of all prisoners re-offend. They accept that many prisons are far worse, but feel there is little incentive to reform, even though Long Lartin has some basic facilities. Every inmate has a cell of his own.
When you move in, you have a bed, table, chair, locker. That's it. Then you make of it whatever you can make of it, which is one good thing. At least you're allowed to do things with your cell. In most prisons, you can get nicked just for hanging a picture on the wall. The problem is that the public think that we live in luxury. At the end of the day, this is just a 7-foot by 8-foot concrete box. It's nothing more.
The corridors are full of personal belongings. Despite a few reminders of home, inmates miss much.
You sort of think, if you're a lifer, if you're doing a long term, let them have their cells how they want it. But it is their house, it is their home. They're going to live there for 20, 30 years. They don't have to live in a metal box today, so they should be allowed a few more luxuries than the average CCAT prisoner who's doing 2 years. We're going back to like the rehabilitation
of the Birmingham Six.
It's very, very, very hard when you're in prison for something doing.
I haven't got my facts and figures with me, but I'm sure they were innocent. The Birmingham Six were 6 Northern Irishmen who were each sentenced to life imprisonment in 1975 following their false convictions for the 1974 Birmingham pub bombings. Their convictions were declared unsafe and unsatisfactory and quashed by the Court of Appeal on the 14th of March 1991. The 6 men were later awarded financial compensation ranging from $840,000 to $1.2 million. The Birmingham pub bombings took place on the 21st of November 1974 and were attributed to the Provisional IRA. Improvised explosive devices were placed in 2 central Birmingham pubs, the Mulberry Bush at the foot of the Rotunda and the Tavern in Town, a basement pub in New Street. The resulting explosions at 2025 and 2027 collectively were the deadliest attacks in the UK since World War II. 21 people were killed, 10 at the Mulberry Bush and 11 at the Tavern in the Town, and 182 people were injured. Arrests and questioning. 6 men were arrested: Hugh Callaghan, it's the man who's talking there, Patrick Joseph Hill, Gerard Hunter, Ricky McKinney, William Power and John Walker. 5 were Belfast born, while John Walker was born in Derry. All 6 had lived in Birmingham since the 60s. All the men, except for Callaghan, had left the city early on the evening of the 21st of November from New Street Station, shortly before the explosions. They were travelling to Belfast to attend the funeral of James McDade, an IRA member whom they all knew. McDade had accidentally killed himself on 14th of November when his bomb detonated prematurely while he was planting it at a telephone exchange in Coventry. When they reached Heysham, Lancashire, they and others were subjected to a special branch stop and search. The men did not tell the police of the true purpose of their visit to Belfast, a fact that was later held against them. While the search was in progress, the police were informed of the Birmingham bombings. The men agreed to be taken to Morecambe, Lancashire police station for forensic tests. On the morning of 22nd November, after the forensic tests and questioning by the Morecambe police, the men were transferred to the custody of West Midlands Serious Crime Squad police unit. Callaghan was taken into custody on the evening of the 22nd of November. While the men were in custody, while in the custody of the West Midlands Police, they were allegedly deprived of food and sleep and were sometimes interrogated for as much as 12 hours without a break. Threats were made against them and they suffered abuses, punches, dogs were being let loose within a foot of them and a mock execution. William Power said that the officers from Birmingham Police Criminal Investigation Department assaulted him. Richard McKinney's daughter said when the family saw him the next day, he had been so badly beaten he was unrecognisable. Power confessed while in Morecambe, while Callaghan, Walker and McKinney confessed at Queen's Road in Aston, Birmingham. People often say, why do people confess? But there's only so much you can take before. It's very easy to say, I would never do it, innit? And by the way, this is from Wikipedia. The trial. On the 12th of May 1975, the 6 men were charged with murder. 3 other men, James Kelly, Mick Murray and Michael Sheehan, were charged with conspiracy. The trial began on 9th of June 1975 at the Crown Court sitting at Lancaster Castle before Mr Justice Bridge and a jury. After legal arguments, the statements made in November were deemed admissible as evidence. The unreliability of these statements were later established. Thomas Watt provided circumstantial evidence about John Walker's association with provisional IRA members. Forensic scientist Dr Frank Skuse used positive Grice test results to claim that Hill and Power had handled explosives. Callaghan, Hunter and McKinney and Walker all had tested negative. GCMS tests at a later date were negative for Power and contradicted the initial results for Hill. Scuses claimed that he was 99% certain that Power and Hill had explosive traces on their hands was opposed by defence expert Dr Hugh Kenneth Black of the Royal Institute of Chemistry, the former HM Chief Inspector of Explosives Home Office. Oh, that's who Mr Q Kenneth Black worked for. Scuse's evidence was clearly preferred by Bridge. The jury found the 6 men guilty of murder. On 15th of June 1975, they were each sentenced to 21 life sentences. Criminal charges against prison officers as a civil action against the police. On 28th of November 1974, the men appeared at court for the second time after they had been remanded in custody at HMP Winston Green. All showed bruising and other signs of ill treatment. 14 prison officers were charged with assault in June 1975, but were all acquitted at a trial presided over by Mr Justice Swanwick. The Six brought a civil claim for damages against the West Midlands Police in 1977, which was struck out on the 17th of July 1980 by the Court of Appeal, constituted by the Master of the Rolls, Lord Denning Gough LJ, and Sir George Baker, under the principle of estoppel. On March 1976, their first application for leave to appeal was dismissed by the Court of Appeal, presided over by Lord Ridgebury. Journalist Chris Mullin investigated the case for Granada TV's World in Action series. In 1985, the first of several World in Action programmes casting doubt on the men's convictions was broadcast. In 1986, Mullin's book, Error of Judgment, The Truth About the Birmingham Pub Bombings, set out a detailed case supporting the men's claims they were innocent. It included his claim to have met some of those who were actually responsible for the bombings. The Home Secretary, Douglas Hurd, referred the case back to the Court of Appeal. In January 1988, after a 6-week hearing, the convictions were ruled to be safe and satisfactory. The Court of Appeal, presided over by Lord Chief Justice Lord Lane, dismissed the appeals. Over the next 3 years, newspaper articles, television documentaries and books brought forward new evidence to question the safety of the convictions. The second full appeal in 1991 was allowed. Hunter was represented by Lord Gifford QC, the others by Michael Mansfield QC. New evidence of police fabrication and suppression of evidence, the successful attacks on both the confessions and the 1975 forensic evidence caused the Crown to decide not to resist the appeals. The Court of Appeal, constituted by Lord Justice Lloyd Mustill and Farquharson, stated that in the light of the fresh scientific evidence, which at least throws grave doubt on Dr. Scuse's evidence, if it does not destroy it altogether, these convictions are both unsafe and unsatisfactory. On 14th of March 1991, all 6 men walked free. In 2001, a decade after the release, the 6 men were awarded compensation ranging from $840,000 to $1.2 million. Richard McKinney, one of the 6 men wrongly convicted of the Birmingham pub bombings, died of cancer on 21st of May 2006, aged 73. He had returned to Ireland shortly after he was freed from prison and died in hospital with his family at his bedside. McKinney was buried on 24th of May in Kelbridge, County Kildare. The other members of the Birmingham Six were present at his wake and funeral. Hugh Callaghan died on 27th of May 2023, aged 93. Good on you, mate. One of the 4 surviving members of the Birmingham Six, Patrick Hill, currently resides in Ayrshire, Gerard Hunter in Portugal, John Walker in Donegal and William Power in London. The success of the appeals and other miscarriages of justice caused the Home Secretary to set up a Royal Commission on Criminal Justice in 1991. The Commission reported in 1993 and led to the Criminal Appeal Act 1995, which established the Criminal Case Review in 1997. Superintendent George Reed and 2 other police officers were charged with perjury and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, but were never prosecuted. Surprise, surprise. During the inquest into the bombings in 2016, Hill stated that he knew the identities of the 3 bombers, who were still 3 men in Ireland. Well, if they were British soldiers, they'd have been charged, wouldn't they? But it just goes to prove, doesn't it? In the face of all the evidence, I know we're getting sort of off the point here. I didn't realise that this documentary was going to interview these people. It sort of proves, though, doesn't it, that really the establishment, what does it care? It cares what it can prove, not whether you're innocent, whether you're guilty. They convicted them on evidence they probably knew was a bit shaky, and then they just kept ignoring the other evidence that says they're innocent, because they would have to admit they made a mistake. Then, if they made a mistake on that one, they could have made a mistake on that one and that one and that one, and it's like an avalanche, and they don't want to admit a mistake. Anyway, let's listen to what he says.
You haven't done. And also, when you wake up each morning and you say to yourself, well, what am I doing in here? But if you were to think about it all the time, it just drives you around the twist. You know what I mean? So you got to do things. No matter what it is, John goes to the gym, I do exceptional writing, I'm writing a book. More so when you're an innocent person, because even the guys that is convicted prisoners and have done the crime, they find it hard enough to do it. And they sometimes come to us and say, how in the name of God do you 2 guys do it?
I lost my home in Birmingham. And my wife, my children had to flee the country, go and live in Ireland. Ireland to her is a foreign country. She'd never been in Ireland in her life before. So I get visits from my wife, say, twice a year. When I came into prison first, my youngest girl was 1 year old. Now she's 16 years old. I never seen that girl growing up. I didn't see none of my children growing up.
Some say the captain eats the cold for breakfast because freshness is everything. It's locked in from sea to plate. And as the captain says, if you like your fish fingers as fresh and tasty as I do, tuck into our new Omega-3 32-pack for even greater value.
Security in all prisons was tightened last year after the dramatic escape by helicopter from Gartree prison. Prisoners at Long Lartin resent paying for this escape. Anti-helicopter devices were installed and the exercise area cut to a small space which could be protected from the air.
I do believe those men were caught eventually. It's a very famous escape in England, and why not? I mean, helicopters are not used every day in England. They're used more than what you think worldwide. Yeah. I can imagine the other security, the highest cat securities at the time, proper went into lockdown, serious security mode after that, because there's no way they'd want that happening again. And then, yeah, the prisoners the prisoners were definitely going to be punished for it, weren't they?
Gartree didn't do us a lot of good, and both myself and many of the inmates and the staff here wondered whether we would lose a great deal of our ethos, if you like. And for a period of time we were on not terribly good ground.
You mean not terribly good terms with the inmates?
No, we maintained that and were able to persuade the inmates that we would use the extra security devices that we have with a minimum of petty restrictions.
We were unhappy about it because before we could exercise out on an open yard, now we exercise in a cage. We've lost about 2/3 of the playing field and we're just caged in all the time. So now there's no sense of freedom in here whatsoever.
Despite extra restrictions,
it's not just the Cat-A's that have that problem on exercise. Every single exercise yard is just a small cage now. Maybe there's exercise yards that are on big old fields. Not that I've ever seen one.
the prison authorities see the need to make prisons less isolated. John Bowden, an inmate at Long Lartin, was convicted of a cruel murder. Yet he persuaded the prison governor to let him convene a unique forum where prisoners could speak out. On March 1st, 60 inmates made their way to the chapel. For the others, it was work as usual. Contradictions ruled. Prison routine remained sacrosanct, even though it was a big day when inmates could for once voice many of their concerns. At 9 o'clock in the chapel, prisoners, prison staff, police, pressure groups and ex-convicts gathered. Many inmates came with prepared speeches and questions. The day-long forum had one absentee, John Bowden himself, who had been transferred out of Long Lartin 4 weeks earlier as a punishment.
The only difference between then and nowadays is the smoking, which is banned, and the abundance of moustaches. Everything else is exactly the same. The get up, the prison blues, the prison greys, the grey jumpers, the blue shirts, the blue t-shirts, the blue jeans. A lot of high text that I see there as well. I mean, you add in to the facial hair, you add in the rat's tails that are about
prisoners, the key topics were prison discipline, too many rules, too few rights, and dispersal to jails far from their homes. Inmates had to wait for guest speakers to argue both that the system had to give prisoners more rights and that they also had to take more responsibility.
Reform is the other key word as far as today's proceedings are concerned. How may it be achieved? Which aspects of the system should be reformed? And who are to be the ultimate beneficiaries of any such reform as may be achieved?
One of the rare moments, I'm sure, in his life that Charles Bronson's been allowed out of the Hannibal Lecter cage. There's the man.
The governor interrupted the proceedings the moment he noticed the placard.
Will be a little easier to visualise.
Excuse me, could I just stop? Do you mind taking that down, please?
What up on you, mate?
Didn't even see it. The first speaker today is Stephen Shaw, who is the director of the Prison Reform Trust, and presumably his address will be on the subject of reform. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you very much. This is a Ladbuck, the new way to get rewarded at Ladbrokes. And these are some of the 100 million Ladbucks that will be dropping weekly. Collect them on our free-to-play games to choose rewards like free spins, free bets and more. Over 100 million Ladbucks dropping every single week at ladbrokes.com.
It is obviously not every day that I receive a letter from a prisoner in one of our long-term maximum security institutions inviting me to take part in what that prisoner, John Bowden, rightly described as a unique discussion about the prison system. It must be said it's not every day that the Home Office agrees to such a debate taking place. On the other hand, we've also discovered that this is not a free debate. The prisoners' rights movement, PROP, has been banned from taking part. Now, I think those two things illustrate the limits of openness and reconstruction, glasnost and perestroika within the penal system. Prisoners cannot expect to exert the influence they may wish to if they are divided amongst themselves. There are now 2,000 prisoners in the prison system on Rule 43 because they are not safe from other prisoners. That number of people in segregation for their own protection has trebled, increased by a factor of 3 during the 1980s. Governors say to me that they're not going to take that much account of prisoners going on about their rights when they know, frankly, how little regard many prisoners pay to the rights of some of their fellows.
Stephen Shaw ended by calling for a prison ombudsman to investigate prisoners' complaints. He was supported by Joe Sim, a sociologist from Liverpool.
It seems
in reality, as in the outside world, if these meetings actually meant anything and actually changed anything, they wouldn't be allowed to do them. Yeah, if elections really meant anything, we wouldn't be able to do them, would we? Yeah, we get to argue about, you know, the colour of him over there, what she believes over there, prison rule 43, blah blah blah. But none of the big things ever get addressed, and they never will, because that's the way it is. Keep the little people talking about the little pittances that we put on show to bug them, so they argue amongst each other. In all the while, the big things. I mean, if any of these things were implemented or listened to or in any way taken any sort of notice of, the prison population wouldn't continue to rise, and it's been continuing to rise ever since I've been watching these documentaries.
It seems to me that the prison system has to be much more accountable. I think there should be a strict introduction of rules and regulations laid down within the prisons themselves in terms of internal accountability, so that prisoners know exactly what they're allowed, what they're due, what the prison officers can and cannot do, and removing a whole range of discretionary powers which prison officers, prison managers have at the moment.
Men inside have never before heard former prisoner Jimmy Boyle explain how the Barlinnie Special Unit changed him. The inmates were eager to learn how the most dangerous man in Scotland had gone straight. In Scotland, Boyle is banned from visiting prison as if the authorities dislike his success.
For the age of 11.
There's a film about this guy. The name eludes me now, but it's a really good film. Check it out. I'm sure there's books about this man as well.
To 38, at 12 and a half months outside, it was a revolving door syndrome that I felt myself caught up in. Felt frustrated, angry, felt there was no way I could really get out of that. But now there is a tremendous anger, embarrassment and humiliation about the part we do, prisoners play, in sustaining a system which is full of parasites that want to tell you what is the best way forward and what is best for you. Because that's what they are, parasites. They live off the back of you. And so the lesson for every prisoner is to try and stop that cycle. I tried to do that with some other prisoners when we were in prison. We've done it through violence against prison officers, nonsense, beating the shit out of them, getting on and doing everything like that we did, but we were fulfilling everybody's fantasy. We were perpetuating the parasites. The magic thing about this special unit was that they provided a forum for prison officers and prisoners to sit down and discuss and debate. The situation allowed us, the prisoners, to empower ourselves and to make choices and to take it on. And what happened in that system is the contradictions of the pettiness of prison and the seriousness of it. And it was coming up against the cultures that I'd lived with, the black and white culture of my existence before that, which was perpetuating the whole vicious cycle of prisons, security, punishment, pain, and we had to try and break that. And breaking it was about suddenly learning about choices. I had to say to myself, I've got choices here. So the revolution really starts with ourselves. No playing the game, taking hard choices, and we've got to say one thing, that we don't want a violent world. And violence means ourselves. First and foremost, it's got to come for ourselves. Thanks very much.
When this documentary was made, I was 4, 1989, I was 4, I was born in 84. Listening to Jimmy Boyle speak, he's talking about the same things that they're talking about now, talking about the same problems that prisoners have now, talking about the revolving door and acting out in prison and being violent in prison. All you're doing is doing what everybody in power expects of you. And he is right, those people are parasites. They live on the back of your misery. So, when you realise that, and he is right. He's right. I mean, attacking the nonces and this and that. No one in the outside world cares. No one in the outside world gives any criminal any props for doing that. So, everything that happens behind the door is irrelevant. No one cares. And the pain that people go through on their journey to realising that no one actually cares, a lot of misery gets left behind.
Most of us prisoners know a lot about the Boyle unit and how successful it was as a place where you could change your whole attitudes. Isn't it true that the unit faced extreme difficulties from the majority of the POA involved in the Scottish prison system?
Prison staff developed in there. Staff started to open themselves up and do things which were quite imaginative and unthinkable, you know, degrees, doing all sorts of things. So they developed as well. It was very much a two-way process. But the interesting thing was that we built this forum between us and a relationship between us. And we then had the department coming down and trying to impose their sort of bureaucracy. And instead of just the prisoners doing it, you had the collective voice of prisoners and prison staff saying, hold it a minute, what's going on here? What are you doing? And in the past, that would be resolved by locking the prisoners up, but they couldn't have locked the staff up.
From that, obviously you say it worked, the unit. What we're worried about, most of the prisoners, is, in a way, this prison works like that. There's a relationship between the staff and prisoners in this prison that is unique in the prison system. I'm talking about the dispersal system, right? And subsequently, since this prison has been going, there's been no crisis of control in this prison. In other words, there's been no tear-ups, no bad assaults on screws, etc., etc. Now, the Home Office knows that works. It knows Albany doesn't work. It knows Wakefield doesn't work. It knows Franklin doesn't work. All them, but it knows this works. Why does it perpetuate those systems when it knows this works? Why doesn't it change those systems to the same as this?
Crucial question, that. Absolutely crucial question. I'm not sure completely the answer to that myself, because there's exactly the same parallel in Scotland, in the sense that the Barlinnie unit is now regarded as simply one of a number of units up there that the Scottish office are now talking about building maximum security units. And in that sense, they knew it worked, where you took prisoners who are introverted, you know, have been brutalised by the system in there, who can't speak, can't articulate, and changed them. Unbelievably, the most dangerous man in Scotland, the most violent prisoner in Scotland, changed them, right? A system that worked. Now, the Scottish office, I think, under pressure from the SPOA, the Scottish Prison Officers Association, and also, you know, to be fair as well, a kind of culture which says we've got to punish. And while you have these places that do appear to work, the overwhelming thrust of the system is towards control.
I also don't have an answer to that question, though I think that some of it has to do with the way in which the system is managed by character.
Some people would say that the prison system doesn't copy Long Lartin as it was. They're saying it worked back then. That's because it works. If they, you know, they don't want it. They don't want a system that works, clearly, because